Hi there, everybody, and welcome to August's Ask Me Anything live coaching call. I'm Jocelyn Brewer. I founded Digital Nutrition. We're going to talk about digital wellbeing, screen time, and cyber psychology. But first, I want to acknowledge that I am the beneficiary of the dispossession of the Wongal people out here in Gadigal land in Sydney, and just want to recognise that I have the privilege of living and working on unceded lands, for which redress has never been made. Yeah, deep breath. That gets me emotional each time. All right. I've got three questions for you tonight, but they're actually quite complex ones. I find sometimes that we really need to kind of spend a little bit of time doing some background so that the context is really there for the conversation. So it's, I guess, a lot of my work, there's no quick fix. And if you're looking for a quick fix, then I'm sorry, you probably come to the wrong place. The first thing I need to just kind of point out is a bit of a disclaimer that this advice is general in nature. It's not intended to replace kind of professional support from a primary treating physician or psychologist. We need to be a little bit careful of privacy, and you'll see tonight that the case study is purposely de-identified. If you choose to come onto the chat and be a part of the conversation, if you choose to, be a part of the conversation, then please keep in mind your personal information and only share what you're comfortable with people knowing. To take what you need, because these are suggestions, not gospel. Everybody's family is different, everybody's situation is different. And as you'll see from tonight, it's really hard to go into depth. Some of these conversations are several sessions worth of kind of therapy and intervention and conversations and support. Keep in mind the session is recorded and will be shared with my community. So the first question I got is, how do I manage screen time in my home? And so I'll go through this relatively quickly, but again, it's like screen time, that's a really big conversation. Screen time is not one thing, it's millions of things. And so this is a real photo that I was allowed to share with you of my daughter when she was about 3. You can see her watching Play School there. She loves a bit of TV. TV is a little bit... I wouldn't call it a problem, but it's just the thing she gravitates to. So she's 6 at the moment, and we have a rule that TV is allowed after 7:30 and before 8:15 on a school day. TV generally goes off at 8:15 unless she's already dressed and ready. Sometimes negotiation around that based on whether I'm dressed and ready. And then it goes off in the evening by 7:30, again, depending on, we do different activities and different afternoon things, but generally it's, everything goes off at 7:30 to wind up and lights out by 7:30. We break up that TV on the wall. I kind of joke that getting a smart TV was like the worst decision of my life, because suddenly everything was on demand, and she obviously knows how to navigate her way between things. We call it Cookie Swell. There's this channel, Cookie Swell C, that you might be familiar with. It's on kids' YouTube. So we talk about when we're watching kids' YouTube, you might be watching the junk food. So definitely I'm using digital nutrition principles here, the junk food, the junk for your brain, the things that we have as treats, the sometimes stuff like Cookie Swell and unboxing all of the plastic things that grinds my gears, compared to other things like Hub. There's all these different channels that I can't remember, but there's sciencey ones and explaining ones and all those sorts of things. So we're very careful. I am very much around when there's YouTube Kids on, because I think it is, you're feeding an algorithm, you're getting more and more of the junk, and to try and like trick it by searching random things. And then with ABC and streaming shows, and again, we talk about, is this really a good show? Is this a wind us up show, or is this a more calming down kind of show? TV is often dynamic, so you can see her there. She will run out of the room, go and get stuff, get dressed up, be dancing, be doing all of these things. It's rarely just kind of blobbing on the couch. It's sometimes and increasingly probably like that, but most of the TV time that she had as a little one, and she still has like a little desk where there's like all crafty stuff. There's a little craft station so that she can easily access all of that stuff there. So that's just TV. Then iPad use, she wouldn't let me actually share a video where I was talking to her about like, what are you doing online? And you've got 5 more minutes and all of that sort of stuff. She was like, no, don't film me. Not allowed to have it. So I can't give you that video. Sorry. We have one iPad in our house. It's not hers, it's her dad's, and he uses it professionally. So it's actually a really important tool. She rarely asks for it, and I think she kind of forgets about it. But we do have lots of stuff around. So we have a backyard, a trampoline, shooks, rabbit, crafts coming out of her ears and driving me crazy with all the mess it makes. So there's lots of other options, and I think that's why it's really not a central kind of feature. When she does ask for it, the rule is that you need to do 20 minutes on reading eggs or something educational to then access the game. So I make it sure that it's about the minutes spent. What I used to do is go, okay, you need to do 2 reading eggs. And then she'd just smash through the reading eggs, get it wrong, not be paying attention in order to get to the game. So now she knows she has to sit there and she might as well do it well for 20 minutes in order then to get the game. At the moment, it's a game called Love You to Bits, and I'll put that link into the YouTube and the recording so that you can have a look at it. It's really cute. It's basically a horse kind of running around. There's empathy aspects to it. There's 18 different traits that it has on the Taming Gaming database, which is the database that I encourage everyone to have bookmarked and to be using to diversify the gaming diet. Andy Robertson, who's the Geek Gamer dad, curated it in lockdown as basically as a searchable database of games based on accessibility and a whole range of sort of other factors. It's brilliant, the Taming Gaming database. In terms of how long she can spend then, it kind of depends. Is it a rainy day? Is it the weekend? Is it after school? We rarely do anything after school, and homework would have to be done first. All of that sort of not displacing things. When we travel in the car, we generally, if it's anywhere like under 2 hours, there's no screen. So we go up to the Central Coast sometimes, no screens in the car. They're the kind of general boundaries. We also give warnings of 5 more minutes, 3 more minutes, and then a reward for coming off without fussing. So part of that reminder is remember that when you come off, there's no more fussing at that point. You'll be able to have that again later and things like that. That's generally okay. And actually the video that she won't give me permission to use is a really good example of that, but I'll work on permissions. And then in terms of phones, because obviously my partner and I have phones around all the time, we use a phone to play story time on the ABC Kids Listen app when she's falling asleep. So there's a phone in the bedroom, shock horror. I'd be losing points with some people for having a phone in the bedroom. Generally, she's not sitting there with a phone, but there's a phone actually in the bedroom. Context matters. We use my phone to do Smiling Mind. If you haven't come across Smiling Mind, it is like I remember when it was first launched, I did some work, like must be 10 years ago, with them when it was launched. It now has so many great little programs for kids, stuff around friendships, emotion regulation, all sorts of stuff. So we use Smiling Mind quite a bit. And we also like to Google random stuff. So I'm at the age, or she's at the age where she asks me questions where I'm like, I don't know. I feel like that Telstra ad when they say with that, the big pond ad where the grandfather like makes up an answer. So we do, like I've recently watched a lot of fetal development videos because she's really into how babies develop and then how paper is made. So yeah, we use it for that. And then she also really loves to look at baby photos and then see photos of like me before she was born. So we do use phones for that. But that's basically how I do screens in my house. It is so far, and admittedly I only have a 6-year-old, not too hectic. But I do kind of hold quite firm on where that sits. Okay, the next question, in fact, this person who I can see online, I don't know whether you want to chat or not, but submitted 2 great questions. I'm going to answer one tonight and then save it. Hi. I'm going to save the other one for next time in case I get no questions. I get fearful I have no questions, then at the last minute I get lots of good ones. So when is it too late to influence and change digital habits in your children? And so I'm going to be a bit of a Pollyanna and say never, but it's going to get harder the longer you wait. So we know that younger kids you have more levers to pull. I still have the ability to say, if you make a fuss and you don't come off the iPad without, negotiation and big blah blahs, especially when I've given you lots of warning and time, then there will be a consequence. There will be a cross on the chart. There will not be a book from book club this term, things like that. Older kids, you have to wait for natural consequences to kick in. So the natural consequence of spending too much time online or doing whatever you're choosing to do might be that you feel awful because you pull an all-nighter to get the geography assignment done, or you don't hand the geography assignment in, or you fail the geography assignment. I always use geography because it was my subject. I feel like I can, own it. And that's super hard for parents to watch. Okay. So it's like letting a toddler run up and touch a hot oven. You're saying, hey, you should probably manage your time better when you spend your time online. You can't be doing other stuff. And it's like, well, you're going to have to suck it and see that the oven's hot. So that can be really tricky. It's also tricky when they pay for their own phone. So once they're earning money and they're like, well, I pay for my data and I can do whatever and you don't control me, and all that kind of stuff comes out. So what it relies on, I think, is communication, respect, your values, and trust. And this is going to ebb and flow, right? As they develop, they get older, you have kind of tricky conversations. They don't like it. Then they realize, oh, maybe parents know stuff about the world, and then they kind of come back. So I think too, it's about us noticing and modeling our own habits have gone wobbly, and we need to change and shape things. So the more we role model, gee, that habit's really slipped. Like me in winter, I'm queen for having a Milo every night, right? And so of course I put on a little bit of weight in winter, and then I go, oh, it's nearly September. I really want to pull that back and start amping up my exercise. So some of this is just about role modeling, noticing our own stuff, showing that we can change it, and then setting that kind of expectation around communication and change and all of that. So I'm wondering then, given all those things, whether you're brave enough to want to have a little chat about that.
Yeah, sure. My dog's just walked in. Hi, Jocelyn. How you going? Thank you for that. So I might just close the door. Lola, can you get out so I can close the door, please? Thank you.
The dog can close the door?
No,
I thought you said my dog's just walked in.
She has. My dog did walk in, but anyway.
Okay. I was like, yes. That's an amazing dog.
Thank you. So I've got 3 kids, and I started working full-time a year and a half ago, and that's when things started to slip. So I now have a 17-year-old, a nearly 15-year-old, and a 9-year-old. The 9-year-old, because I've learnt with my mistakes with the older 2, I'm quite okay. Yeah, although a couple of those things that you just said, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. But the other 2, they bought their phones.
Yeah.
But we pay for the data.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, like Ruby, who's 14 and a half, she averages like 5 hours a day on her phone.
So what I would say too is, if you're looking at screen time is tracking how much I'm on my Bank Australia app. So are you using screen time to measure how much time she's online? What are you using to measure how that?
Yeah.
So I would see if you can dig into that a little bit more. I agree, time is a really big thing, but sometimes we jump to, oh my gosh, that's 5 hours, but it's 5 hours cumulatively. And it does look at what it's tracking. It tracks the fact that I check Fitbit.
Yeah.
And okay, that's 3 minutes, and checking my bank balance is 2 minutes or something. But that sometimes is quite a blunt instrument. Anyway, yeah. Continue.
No.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all good. I'm aware of that. And so, because I had a lot of battles with my older son, and I think also what's hard is that Phil and I, my husband, we're probably just a little bit different. So I grew up in the Blue Mountains, very organic.
Yeah.
Childhood.
Yeah.
Didn't really have a telly. And when we were allowed to watch it, it was quite strict.
Mm-hmm.
And I just know in my gut that just spending all this time on your phone is just not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, like my 17-year-old son, he's really influenced by, the people that he's watching. And,
Yep.
so he's become a real gym junkie and his body has just changed overnight.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's just, I think that's scary as well, is that the influence they get from people they're watching just
Absolutely.
changes them.
And I think that's why my focus is much more about the quality and the context than it is necessarily the time. So the time is the easy factor, and that, we can kind of go, okay, 2 hours, you're done. But if those 2 hours are watching men's right activists or getting into the manosphere and being really influenced by some of the toxic parts of the internet, then that's problematic, right? 2 minutes of that stuff can be really problematic.
Yeah.
So sitting down, and this is, I guess, that last point is like talking about, hey, like I've really noticed some positives, like you kind of make that shit sandwich where you positive, not so great thing, positive at the end, where you're trying to communicate that. I really like that you're taking, value in exercise and being active. But I'm kind of worried about some of those messages, and I'm wondering if you've heard about X, Y, and Z, something to kind of counteract that.
Yeah.
And then, hey, I love that you can be here for this conversation. I really value the fact that you've, kind of let me talk. Sometimes talking to a teenage boy where they actually let you finish your sentences can be something to say, hey, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I wondered too, if even engaging in a conversation, you can be like, so tell me more about that. Like, I don't know, the kind of playing dumb stuff. I don't know anything about insert whatever he's into. Like, I just started my first powerlifting session yesterday. I don't know that much about it. I just know I feel like lifting really heavy stuff. So really kind of giving him the opportunity to then tell you more about what information he does have, and whether or not you can notice, are there some critical thinking skills already switched on with that, right?
Yeah.
So as my example, I read an article a friend of mine wrote about how she got into like lifting heavy stuff. And I was like a bit jealous, not jealous. I was a bit like curious. I was a bit like, oh, I want to see if I can lift 100 kilos. I cannot. I can lift maybe 40, as it turns out yesterday. But I was kind of like influenced by this article where I had to then go, oh, wait, I'm a completely different person to her. Like, she's super alpha. She's amazing, super alpha.
Yeah.
And I'm like an A minor. And I had to really kind of sit with, I'm just curious, but I'm not trying to be competitive. And
Yeah.
I know this is maybe not good for my body
Yeah.
if I do it in a particular way. So I guess I'm just using that as an example of like, can you notice then as he's talking some of those critical skills around going, yeah, I like this, but I don't like that part, or that person's a bit hardcore, and, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's a good point. They're good points. Yeah.
Because I think too, I shared in my newsletter, not yesterday, but the fortnight before, even someone like Andrew Huberman, who's a professor at Stanford, who has millions of followers. His podcast is like 2 hours of in-depth science. Even some of the stuff he shares is, outside his lane, not in his wheelhouse, sometimes selling supplements and other stuff that there's contradictory evidence for. So even someone like that is, and all the kind of dude bro people aren't necessarily 100% right all of the time.
Yeah.
And being able to say, oh, that sounds really interesting, and not freaking out too much, but being able to listen in could be helpful.
Yeah.
And just keeping communication open, because so many young people say, I don't talk to mum and dad about when stuff's going bad on the internet, because the first thing they're going to do is ban my phone, turn the Wi-Fi off, stop me connecting. And that's too hectic. This is going to feed into the next question too, actually. It's too hectic. It is not worth risking it. So I'm going to shut up shop and not talk about it.
Yeah.
So the more you can allow him to talk to you and build that, even though there's parts of you that's going, this is just not good, this is not, what I wish for, that you can kind of then, absolutely still sit with that gut, but also see it from their perspective and share with them your gut. Like, for me, this is so different to how I grew up, and so different for me as you know, honoring that mama bear that is to protect them and to look out for them, right? And to stop them touching the proverbial hot oven.
Yeah.
And just be able to communicate that, you know, hey, why I'm feeling like this is just because I want you to have the best opportunities and not to be limiting yourself with some of these thoughts.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Let me know how you go.
I will. I will.
Thank you for just showing up and sharing. Awesome.
That's okay.
Cool. All right. The next one here, I'm going to kind of do a couple of slides to introduce some of the concepts because I think it deserves it. So then we can look at the next kind of case study. And I'm going to emphasize here too, this is not a complete, I don't, you know, we're taking pieces here. This is not a complete, you know, treatment or anything like that. It's general in nature. Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. So school anxiety. Often you will hear this term school refusal. School refusal and school attendance is really terrible post-pandemic, all these things around school and refusal as these two words smashed together. I want you to take those two words out of your brain and put them in the bin, because this is actually about anxious avoidance, and the term that we use, and you know, generally people who are doing good work in this space are talking about school avoidance or school anxiety. This is about can't, not won't. Okay. And so as soon as we switch it out of this, oh, they won't do this, and it's disobedience, and we get into they cannot, it is a disability, not disobedience, then we shift gears and we're going to get further with kids who can't get themselves to school, okay, and can't be in mainstream, traditional, outdated learning environments, okay. I have some radical ideas, as you might have worked out, is that more and more school is just your ability to tolerate a really shit system that most of the adults are not working hard enough or fast enough to change quick, so it meets the needs of modern adolescents. So, you know, it's a big thing, revolutionizing education. I do see school refusal managed really poorly, and maybe that's just my experience because I work with the really tricky end of this. So I do a lot of advocacy for students where schools are literally breaching the Disability Discrimination Act by forcing kids to do things that just is ridiculous and illegal in some cases, okay? It's not simple as just come to school and go to class. Like once you're at school, it'll be fine. It's like, no, once I get to school, it's another level of shit show beyond getting out the door, because we're not seeing this. You can't see people's anxiety. If they had like, you know, a gash on their leg and they were limping, we'd be like, oh no, let's help you. And I kind of don't jokingly, but I think this is a really important kind of example, is imagine that we managed anxiety as consistently as we did anaphylaxis. So I had somebody tell me this week that, long story short, their kid could no longer access the support that they needed. And it was unfair to expect the whole school to know that this student had anxiety. And I just call massive BS on that, because I would say if a student had anaphylaxis, it would be plastered on the staff room walls. Staff would be walking around with little ring binders of all the kids with anaphylaxis. So we need to do better to actually recognize what's going on for kids who have anxiety. They are not choosing anxiety. They are not choosing to not want to go to school. They cannot exist in that environment for a variety of reasons, which are complex and multifaceted. So that's school anxiety. School anxiety and screens, however, we do see a bit of a correlation, and screens, you know, can be a contributor of avoiding school, because suddenly you have all these other things to do. And those other things can be full-time jobs, and they meet our psychological needs. So you might have heard me talk before about those 3 psychological needs of competence, feeling good and a sense of mastery over stuff. So competence, I'm going to blank on them. Control, being able to have autonomy and choose what I'm doing. Today, I am going to play with this avatar in this particular game, and I'm going to use these tools to create my world. And then connection, so our ability to relate and be a part of something, all right? So what happens is screens and online, not actually the screen's just a thing. The activities that we do through screens meet those needs much better than sitting in a box with 30 other people and all of the sensory overload that can happen for some young people in those spaces. Okay. So yes, screens are blamed as a contributor of school avoidance, but we know that how we use screens is complex and multifaceted, as well as the nature of anxiety and how anxiety shows up. So playing a solo player combat game, like an R-rated combat game where you're fighting and you're kind of creating neural pathways that are very, very different to a rich menu of online activities, including that socializing and connection, really, really different. So we need to look at what you're playing and what's being displaced, and then what needs are being met. Screen use is also often the only thing that a young person looks forward to. So I've worked with kids where in a suicide plan, like a safety plan, we say, okay, what are your reasons to live? And they say to play games. If I was to take that away, and again, this is a particular example, and it sounds like hectic out of context, but you get the context here, would be causing more harm than it would be doing good. What we're looking at is weaning back and then diversifying what they're playing. Okay, so if they're playing solo player combat games, can you play multiplayer games to begin with? Can you do, join the Discord server? Most of them are already. So you're playing the game, then you're on the Discord server, talking to people about how to play the game. You're on YouTube watching other people play the game. Remembering that watching other kids play video games is kind of like adults watching MasterChef. Okay, we like to go, oh, they watch each other play the game. And I'm like, yeah, there's a whole industry of cooking shows that we buy into, as well as other kind of shows where we watch people get married and have relationship dramas. But it's the young people and their screens, isn't it? So yeah, you get my point there, that we really need to look then at what the screen use is, where it fits in with the anxiety, and what psychological needs are being met, case by case by case. And yes, there are some stereotypes to how that happens. So again, I would invite the questioner here, just participate however you feel comfortable. I just pulled out parts of what you put in your email so we could focus on like the activities. So this is a 16-year-old who finds it really difficult to go to school and is engaging in a range of services to support that happening, uses screens to regulate emotions and to calm down when stressed. And I put some stuff in yellow just so I can remember to come back to it. Does digital art and 3D modeling for VR worlds, digitally nutritious, is creating a portfolio of digital assets, great for future. Also spends time playing games. I'm going to want to know what kind of games and how much, and mostly this to facilitate talking to friends. Okay, so remembering that games are like modern day town hall steps where you're just doing more stuff, or like skate parks where rather than skating around, you're wandering around, as an elf, catching things or building stuff or whatever. The high-spec graphics computer is downstairs in a public space. So the graphics computer where they're playing games, I presume, is public, so you can see what's being played. High school laptop is in the study in a quieter area of the house. Beautiful. I love that there's the different zones to participate in. No screens in bedroom. With art, gaming, and distance ed, he'd be on a computer most of the day, as many of us are with work. Goes for a run most days, puts himself through a stretching routine every morning, does the chores asked to, eats at the table, converses amicably, etc. This is a really, really great case study, by the way. Some of the advice coming from some people is to remove all devices. WWYD is, what would you do? So remembering this is general and we haven't done a huge amount of background here. I know a bit more than's being presented, but I would say that the two things we want to work on is finding different ways to regulate emotions and calm down. And we'd look specifically at how that is happening. Is that using screens to regulate and calm down by doing drawing? And as you made the point in your email, if he was drawing on paper, we wouldn't say, oh, don't draw on paper, don't use drawing to regulate. Love it. You're kind of ahead of the curve in some of my thinking here. So I would look at, are there other ways we can kind of just diversify those emotion regulation skills? So some things from practices like dialectic behavioral therapy, building some distress tolerance and other things that are offline. Mainly like if the internet died for 5 hours or the electricity was off, what would we do? Okay, so to build that out from that perspective, and then what kind of games are being played. Generally, I don't think from what you've told me that actually this is about the screens. This is about school not meeting his needs, right? So I would be looking at that and looking at what other things the school can do to create an environment that is desirable to go to. And the answer, quite frankly, might be not much, and that we need to kind of really look at those alternative pathways. I presume too, we're talking 16. Is that year 11 or year 10?
He's in year 10, but he actually does year 11 maths. Yeah, accelerated maths.
Yeah. So you're kind of in that phase where
we're choosing our year 11, 12 subjects and trying to figure out what he wants to do, and which is all computer related, graphics design.
And look, again, I think while there's the run, the other thing I was going to ask about was sleep. So my kind of general philosophy is if you are getting a right amount of sleep, that is for a teenage boy, that kind of age, minimum 7, like a couple of nights a week, but mostly solid 8.5 of sleep. And that sleep is within what we would call like, regular hours. We're not going to bed at 1 a.m. and then rocking into school too late. The first thing I do is treat the sleep cycle and get sleep hygiene sorted. And then when there's a bit of physical activity, and then there's all the social, family, belonging, participation things, then technology can fit into the gaps. That's kind of my summation. Would I remove all devices? No.
No. Yeah, it just didn't feel right at all. They're pushing to make it boring and take away everything, and it just felt bad. Really bad. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it.
And I think unfortunately that's I'm going to try and be delicate. There's not enough understanding of some of these things across school psychologists in general. I am, as an ex-school counsellor, trying to really share that out. As an selective school teacher, trying to share that out. A lot of the population I work with are selective students, because their need for to be challenged is really there. And I don't think teaching practices have kept up with, even online, have kept up with what kids can do.
Yes.
And those like accelerated, clever kids who really are teaching themselves through Google searches and their own curiosity are being let down, because you only need to find that one teacher in the school who's really going to kind of speak their language to try and make that happen. The distance ed options, while I know some of the people who are running distance ed are still quite limited in how they do things, they're not setting the world on fire from a digital education perspective. Sorry.
Yeah.
So those people out there who be watching who know me, but like they're not, simple as that.
Yeah, there's barely any contact. It's just, do your thing. And it's definitely the less interaction he'll have with a teacher, the less he'll prioritize that course. Whereas the ones who do reach out, he'll say, I better do that subject because, they speak to me, but many of them don't. So it's been a bit of an eye-opener, really.
Yeah.
And of course, we'd love to get him back to face-to-face school, but it just seems impossible at this point in time.
What was the breakdown from face-to-face to now? Like, what was that kind of dissolving of?
Like I mentioned in the email, it went from he would go to class but then have to leave, and he'd go to sick bay and end up calling me to go and pick him up, and I was picking him up almost every day. And then it got to be I won't get out of the car, and then I won't leave the house. But then he would go to sit in a quiet space by himself.
Yeah.
But then it was very much the vice principal was pushing this can't go on. He'll listen to us because we can be the bad guys, and he's manipulating you.
Oh yeah.
So we're just going to put him in the library where he'll
spoil him by listening
Yeah.
to his emotions.
That's right, by indulging his wants and needs. So
Yeah.
they would spring these things on him. Say, sorry, you can't use the quiet space today. We're using it. Go into this highly stressful environment. So all that just blew his mind, and to the point where he wouldn't go at all.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a very, very similar situation to one I've heard before, where I call it the invisible line of patience. We're here, and we, every
Yeah. Yeah, they talk the talk.
Valued and cared for, right? Like literally,
Yeah.
that's the slogan in the department. Every student is known, valued, and cared for. We care about you until you start being a bit of a pain in the ass, until you are a bit frustrated because you want special treatment and we've got 1,500 other kids to deal with, rather than saying the more we support you and learn from meeting your needs and adapting education to meet those needs, the more we have a plan for the next kid who shows up. Because I can tell you, your kid is not the only kid going through this. There's probably the number of kids who they reckon at one point had not gone back to school post-COVID, and this is obviously changed a bit, but it will give you a bit of a benchmark, is between 4,000 and 5,000 young people.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And increasingly, when we talk about that regulation and him needing to call you and kind of escape, it's literally the sensory overload of probably feeling like, and again, I say this with a lot of respect. I've been there. I'm not a teacher anymore, literally, because I couldn't hack it, probably. It's, like you're herding cats. You're trying to keep kids who are literally have low attention spans and low sometimes interest in the curriculum contained, even in, selective high schools where they're there because they are, clever clogs and they've got that ability. It's sometimes just noisy and unregulated and unpredictable, and it's too much. It then kind of gives them that sensory flooding and that need to flee.
Yep.
So unless there is, again, I think calm corners and things like that, like, again, only work to the degree that somebody really wants to put resources in making sure that's a thing that's always there consistently, regardless of whether it's needed moment to moment, day to day. There's got to be a better system than that. However, again, it's a funding thing, and this really parlays into how exhausted teachers are, how run down the whole system is, and even more now that we have I'm going to be political, it doesn't matter, I don't work for the department anymore, a premier in a situation where there's a backflip on that negotiation, where hemorrhaging teachers leaving, they're talking about paying new teachers 12 grand a year more to come in and then be trained up by teachers who have been around for ages who aren't getting anything. It's mind-blowing. And schools will be empty. You have a whole bunch of first years out running the education department pretty soon. So it's a big systemic problem, I guess, is what I'm saying, where people are doing their best, but they're doing it with old tools because a DP is literally there as a disciplinarian who, that invisible line of, I guess where I was going before I went on my tangent was the invisible line of patience. Oh, yes, you can have your timeout card and there's the quiet space in the wellbeing center and everything, until it's like, oh, not you again. Haven't you gotten over this scaredy cat business? No, you can't have that. You're not doing that. We're not doing that anymore. You need to come to school. And it's like, what? You're never going to get this kid on side if you do that to them. So some of the work I do is in and around advocacy, stuff like that. And usually talking about the Disability Discrimination Act helps, and mentioning a ministerial or writing to your local member and things like that can get you some newfound patience for time.
Yeah, I guess in our case, nobody really knows what. I don't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do because it's a classroom thing, and if you can't practice exposure without being there, and he won't be there. So there's no, there's no middle ground. It's all or nothing.
Yeah.
So it's
How
nothing.
long have you got at distance ed when you said it was a temporary placement? I've never heard of a temporary placement at distance ed.
Yeah, it's 2.9. It's a year. It's
Okay. Oh, but yeah,
two,
okay. No, I have actually. Yep. Okay.
200 days. So we started halfway through last term.
Okay.
So we've got, 2.5 full terms.
Okay. You might want to have more of a chat where we can kind of talk more freely, if you want some kind of advice and support, again, depending on, what you need and what you think is useful. I don't want to, talk about exactly which school or anything like that here.
Yeah.
It's, are you in the school can't, not school won't group? Are you kind of up to
On
date?
Facebook.
You've got.
Yeah.
I'll go so you can speak freely, but thank you for sharing that, DJ. I don't know what your name is, but yeah, all
That's
the very
okay.
best.
It's more just because we are recording it, so the recording will go out. But yeah, some of those Facebook groups I think might be useful.
Yeah, I'm on the School Can't Australia, and the stories blow me away, really. And the stories of schools that push take everything away, and the kids just go downhill fast and end up being worse off than where they started. So we definitely, I don't want to do anything that's going to make it worse.
Would you consider homeschooling? Like if he's relatively independent and a self-starter, homeschooling and then using some of the there's a whole range, and I don't want to mention brand names, but actually I don't get paid by any of them, but there's Education Perfect. I think that's what it's called. There's a range of like organizations that popped up out of COVID and because of the rise in homeschooling, where they actually take you through the curriculum, you pay a certain amount. But see, a lot of homeschooling requires you then to be the supervisor, as it does for distance ed.
Yeah, that's right.
That can put strain on the relationship. If you then like, no parent should be a teacher. That's what we all learned. I can't even do the homework with my 6-year-old on a Monday afternoon without like wanting to jump out the window. So yeah, there's a few things we could explore, I guess, if you wanted to chat more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that distance ed, I think I have a friend who works there, and she said as you go into year 11 and 12, it's a much closer relationship with the teachers. So I would hope that maybe, they can, he will get a good education. Otherwise, he's 17 in May. We just stop school and he can do some open university units of,
I was going to say TAFE and OTAN, you can still do lots of HSC pathways and then even go to uni without the HSC, right? Non-HR pathways, then mature student pathways and things like that.
Yes.
But there's many paths up the mountain. Some of the diploma courses too, like if he wants to do, I'm guessing, game designing or other things, some of the courses may not require a HSC, especially the registered training organizations, so your SAEs or some of those sorts of places.
Yeah. They just require a portfolio or
I'm not completely up to date with it, so you'd have to, check it out. And once you've done diplomas there, I've had kids who have done their diplomas through, say, SAE, and then have moved through into bachelor degrees at UTS.
Yeah.
So, like the system is slowly, it's like the glaciers slowly.
Yeah.
The education system is slowly crumbling, and the HSC is having less and less
relevance.
Kind of and if he's a smart kid who can apply himself when the right ecosystem for learning exists, that will show through, and that's what they want to see. I guess you just don't want to burn through cash putting him into one of those RTO courses, which can be a little bit expensive, even HEX help stuff, and especially with HEX being indexed the way that it is now,
7.9%.
Yeah,
outrageous,
right? So you want to be conscious of that too, because if he's not ready, and I've had students where they've really bombed in the HSC, and I'm like, do not enroll in uni yet, or if you do, make sure you get out before the census date and you get charged,
Yeah.
so that you're not just kind of feeling like a failure because you couldn't cope with that either.
Yeah.
But is he seeing a psychologist? Has he got an external, somebody who
He
can?
does. I'm not super happy. I mean, he comes out saying he doesn't listen to me. And I think, what? How does that happen?
Yeah.
How does that work?
So either provide some feedback and be like, hey, you know, I'm feeling like sometimes you've kind of missed my point. I'm constantly saying to kids, like, am I on the wrong track, or have I got like an old lady's brain for this problem? Because sometimes there just is that gap between what I'm interpreting, you know, literally from my perspective, to what a young person sees, and they're like, what's she talking about? And I'm like, I just want to check in. Is this kind of in the, and they're like, yeah, or no, because you missed this part, or got, I don't know. Sometimes
Yeah, I think it's more because we engage this psychologist in order to paperwork us into DE because we needed that. And he's very much on that path, and talking to Luca very much, talking to our son about the transition plan.
Yeah.
And he's very focused on that word. And if he argues the point, he just talks about this is the gold, exposure therapy is the gold standard, and we need to do our sites hierarchy so we can work up that ladder of exposure. And that is he's very single-minded about that. Whereas my son is, well, I'm not getting anything out of school, you know, it has all these reasons, and they're not being listened to.
Yeah. And I think maybe if I guess I have a different background, having worked in schools and understanding schools, that we're not trying to fit somebody back into that system. Especially, we've kind of clarified too that there may be some neurodiversity, but there's not really clear autism there. Like, it's not, you know, there's maybe a bit of ADHD, or there's some features and traits, but it's not necessarily a full diagnosis. What I often see is that kids are neurodivergent, and we're basically saying, please go and be more neurotypical. Please go and mask and camouflage and assimilate better and better and better. And exposure is literally saying, here's how to mask. And that is the opposite of what we should be doing. So I would say, even though he doesn't have a full diagnosis, or that's a questionable thing, I think there's some self-identification that's valuable in there. Are we just trying to, you know, do that proverbial round peg and square hole? And we actually need to look at the system. Is the system actually creating the stress? This is not made up. This is not, you know, like, I can't go to school because there's a dragon that comes out of, you know, the whiteboard and is going to, you know, like, there's no, you know, that kind of thinking. This is like, I get stressed and dysregulated. And yes, some of those skills can be taught so that screens aren't the only way that happens. But like, is it worth trying to go back into a mainstream setting? I guess is the big question. So my approach would be quite different from what you're saying. Not that person is wrong. It's just that I'm looking at it differently.
Yeah.
Cool.
We just don't know. And nobody knows where to go from here, basically.
Happy to help if you need me. Cool.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and insight.
All right. Okay. I don't think we've got time for any more burning questions. I will do this session again on Wednesday, the 6th of September. I may be in Brisbane at that point. I might be on a plane. It might not actually happen. I might move it around. You can work with me in lots of different ways. I do school consults, helping you deploy policy, or maybe working with school refusers or school can't kids, as well as, you know, helping you with what should we do about that smartphone ban stuff, parent webinars, parent coaching, and lots of courses. You can see the shop page on my website with a new one that I'm going to announce really soon. So thank you for your time. I hope this is helpful. Ciao for now.